Hey everyone, this is my first video I'm ever making, like detailing my fishing, and I'll make a little YouTube out of it. I don't know if I'm gonna make a big thing out of it or do on the water stuff. I don't really know what my long-term plan is, but I thought I'd just make a little video, see how much interest it can garner. And it's been kind of something I've been thinking about for a little while. Like, let me start making videos about some of the lures and techniques I use, because I go saltwater fishing, I go bass fishing, I fish the banks of ponds, I have a little boat I take out on occasion, I go kayak fishing, mostly saltwater for the kayak. So I'm like, let me start making some videos talking about some of the baits and techniques I use, and see what kind of interest it gains. I might do some on the water stuff, but what finally pushed me to do it is my wife took and organized all my fishing tackle in the garage, so I could see all my rods, reels, tackle. She organized all my duck hunting decoys, shotgun shells, turkey hunting stuff. Took and organized all that, and I'm like, dang, I have a lot more tackle than I really thought I did, because I like to be organized, but I don't like to put in the work to do it. So that was kind of her birthday gift to me. It turned out great. I'll probably do a video on that here soon. But the first video I'm gonna talk about is my spring bass fishing technique. For me, spring in Northeast Florida is more or less starts on Valentine's Day, is what I think. There's still some cold snaps in late February, early March. But for the most part, when I think of kind of my spring pattern, I think of from Valentine's Day up until roughly Easter. So let's just say from mid-February to mid-April. It's kind of the techniques I'm going to talk about. By mid-February, you already got a lot of bass on the beds around here. And by mid-April, they're kind of coming off the beds. But while they're on the beds, you got some fish pre-spawn, getting ready to spawn, some fish actually spawning, and some fish post-spawn during kind of that 2-month period, which is what we're in right now. We're in the second week of March. We do kind of have a cold snap, but they're still kind of going to be in the same holding pattern because the weather's been pretty consistently warm. The water temperature's pretty consistently around the same thing. And for me, this is all just related to walking the banks of retention ponds. So I'll kind of go into it. I'm going to talk mainly about 3 lures I like to use. So when I go to a pond, I take 2 or 3 rods rigged up. I like kind of something with a moving bait, something to fish a little bit slower, and then something way slower, something rigged up specifically for sight fishing. So I'll be kind of going down the bank winding something, and when I see a fish spawning, I have kind of a method to the madness, okay? So starting out, really starting in late January, but definitely beginning in February into mid-February, I like a swim jig. I will say too, just put this out there, y'all probably already know, because I'm not big time or nothing. I'm not sponsored or anything like that. So anything I talk about is just baits that I buy on my own dime that I like using. Okay, so this is a swim jig, okay? I got this at Academy. Now this color, it's a brim color. I'm not sure exactly what they call it, but it's made by Strike King. It's the Greg Hackney swim jig. I really like this product, okay? And the main trailer I like using on it this time of year is called a Z-Crawl. It's made by Zoom. Now this is the junior size. This is usually what I like doing. And I like this swim jig basically right out of the pack. I'll trim the skirt up a little bit if I think it's necessary, but for the most part, straight out of the pack with the Z-Crawl Junior. It has a nice kick in action. And this brim color with the black and blue Z-Crawl does well. The Junior, black and blue on it, but there's another color I use. This is called Watermelon Seed. And it looks exactly like a brim swimming along. And I wind it just real slow. I'll keep my rod really at almost parallel with the water, maybe a hair above it. I just wind it slow. When I get it up against a lily pad or something coming by, I'll just give the rod one little pump. Just one little pump like that. And I just keep swimming it. And I like a heavy action rod. I use a 7'3" heavy with straight braid. Usually 30 or 40 pound braid. I've been fishing it on 30-pound braid this year. I think a 6-8 to 1 gear ratio, which this time of year is a good ratio. Later in the year, I'll step it up. But this time of year, it's a good ratio to just keep it moving at a nice speed. And the legs on that just kind of kick opposite. Real great action, like I said, if I bring it next to an obvious piece of cover, a lily pad, or maybe a point of grass or weed sticking out from the bank, I'll give it a pump. And they just smoke it. On that, I'm keeping it coming pretty much the same rate level in the water, to where when I get a bite, I don't really set the hook hard. I just kind of start reeling real fast and just kind of lean into the fish and just reel. And I don't think I've ever lost a fish on that lure. If you just reel real hard and you don't really set the hook, you just kind of swipe it to the side, or kind of sometimes bring it straight up, just depending on how you hook the fish. We'll go into that later anyways. Okay, so that's bait number 1. Bait number 2 I like is a chatterbait. I just use the cheap Walmart original chatterbait by Z-Man. I think this color is green pumpkin purple. Now this is one color I like on more of a sunny day. Okay, on a cloudy day, this is a like a shad pattern. I think they call this the sexy shad actually. It's just white with some yellow and like a bluish grayish in it. Now, one second. On the shad one, I like this trailer. It's made by Strike King. It's called the Rage Swimmer. It has a kicking action because it imitates more of like a bait fish. It has a really good action on the back of there. That's the 3.75 inch model. They got like 5 sizes in that thing. Sometimes if I want to target bigger fish, I'll use this one. This one tends to get bigger bites for me. This is by Guggen, Saucy Swimmer. Same size, but it has a little bit of a different, harder thumping action. So I'll go to that one if I want to specifically target bigger fish, or I'm at a pond where I know bigger fish live, or if the wind's ripping a little harder, I like that one. That's another thing. Calmer, slicker, calmer days, I like the swim jig. When the wind gets up, I go to a chatterbait. Now, on that one, I don't fish it on the same rod and reel. Like I said, 7'3", 30-pound braid, heavy action swim jig. Chatterbait, I like 7 foot, medium heavy action, and I like 17 or 20-pound monofilament. The reason being, monofilament has a lot of stretch in it. Braid has no stretch. I'm fishing the swim jig kind of straight. It's moving along. I'm not worried about them really seeing the line on either bait. It's moving along. They're not really gonna see the braid. But that one I keep at a steady retrieve, and I can just lean into them and reel hard and the hook's set. The chatterbait, I'm juking and driving it more because I like to kind of pop it. I reel it and I pop it because usually I like it in the wind. And we usually on that pop, like I give it a real hard pop. That right after that, or as I'm doing it, is when I get the bite. And on that one, I'll reel out the slack, and I tend to lean into them kind of hard on the chatterbait. For whatever reason, I've noticed you kind of got to do that. So the stretch in the monofilament kind of helps to absorb that shock in the shorter but lighter action rod. I've found is a better setup for that. Now, if I'm moving along and I see a fish spawning, this is what I go to on these ponds. I go to a drop shot, okay? Usually a 1/2 ounce weight. I buy these at Walmart. I think they're called the water gremlin. I forget what they call them. But you can literally buy this at Walmart. All this stuff, pretty much you can find at Walmart. Maybe you have to go to Academy, but that's the weight I use. And all it is I tie the weight underneath it. And this is the hook. This comes at Walmart too. I don't forget what it's called, but it's a #1 hook, or maybe a 1/0. I think this is a 1/0 hook is what I found is the best. It's got a weed guard on it. It's made by Eel Claw, and it's got a guy named Chris Zaldane on the pack. I forget exactly what they call it. Now, I'll drop this to a fish I see on the bed. And starting out, I like a bright colored bait. I'll sometimes go to a natural bait if won't bite it. I'll change up the color, something like green pumpkin, watermelon, kind of a brim color. But it's a trick worm, white. It's bright, I can see it. When the fish inhales it, I know. But when they suck this thing in with that little hook, they get it. And I don't fool around. I use 50-pound braid and a 7'6" extra heavy action flipping rod. You ain't gotta really set the hook hard with this. It basically just hooks them, but I just reel hard because I don't like jacking with the fish. Last year I caught a 5-pounder, one close to 6, jumped off one that was probably in the 8-pound class and caught a 9.5-pounder on it. This year I've caught a 6.5 on it and some small ones. So that's what I like. Now, a quick bed fishing technique, you'll see a smaller fish on it a lot of times, and you'll pitch it in there, you'll see a big one swim on there. Or you might see a big one and a small one. The small fish, 9.9 times out of 10 is gonna go for it first. You kind of have to gauge the mood. We'll get into that at probably a later video, but sometimes you got to play keep away with the small one, wait for the big one to eat it. But anyways, thanks for watching. Put this up on YouTube. Like the video. Please subscribe. I know this ain't a high class production, but we're gonna get there. It's something I've been thinking about a while. So I said, why not go for it? Thank you.